Hey everybody, welcome back. So today we're continuing our work on the Working Stiff Factory, and we're gonna try to get some walls, maybe a ceiling, some other random things, and there's gonna be a lot of building montages, so be prepared for that. It'll be sped up a little bit just because you don't need to see the same thing over and over again. But if I do something super cool that you're not aware of, I will most certainly explain it. If you end up liking this episode, please give it a thumbs up because that's super cool and it helps us out. And if you're new and you want to see more, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and turn on notifications just so you know next time an episode comes out, because I'm going to try to do at least 2 of these per week, just so you can see the process and, see how it unfolds. So what I'm doing right now is what I showed you guys in the first episode, which is, basically how to use the Z key to make sure that you're not building walls block by block. So if you remember, we do Z from one corner to another, and then we adjust our box using Shift and G, and then you hit L with whatever is in your hand at the time. So you just want to make sure you have the right block or whatever you're using in your hand at the time, so you don't accidentally, do an entire wall of glass when you're trying to do concrete or wood or steel or whatever else. Alright, so building montage, start! Alright guys, so we have all of our walls. Awesome. Now what we're going to do is we're going to replace the concrete with our glass that we want to use for the windows. I'm going to choose the bulletproof glass because, it's a factory. There's probably going to be bulletproof glass. So here's a neat little handy trick, is if you hold Shift Z, it will actually place it inside of the existing block. So you'll see like that blue block now looks flat. And if you just move over, you'll see this happen, right? You just move over, make the box bigger, and then when you hit L on that glass block, it's now replaced it with glass. And you can continue doing that, if you want to do different sizes. So say you don't want to have all of your windows the same width or height. You can change it up using, the Shift hold Z. And then once this is done, you'll see another little trick that I'll show you. Alright, so there you'll see what I was talking about with the little tip. If you're using the same size windows, you can actually just move the blue box over to where you want to include windows and then just hit L. So it's a lot easier. The Shift Z is fine to use, obviously. If you're making, windows that maybe like you're going to have a couple skinny and then a wider one, or some are going to be super tall and some are not going to be super tall. So using the G key on that block, once you already have it, is a lot easier to, kind of just like swoop along, go one space in between, move that blue box, hit L, hit G again, move the blue box, hit L, and you're going to get it done in half the time. So it's a neat little tip for when you're trying to place a lot of the same thing all at one time. It's pretty much equivalent to when you're building walls. So anything that you can save time with, you should do, most definitely. I'm going to continue on with my windows. Building montage started. Alright, now what I'm going to be doing is kind of figuring out my window situation here in the front and how I want the front of the building to look. So I'm basically just, you know, placing some blocks, and then I'll be adding bulletproof glass in between. So with this, you know, it's a lot easier. You just hit Z, go up into that corner, hit Z again with your glass block, and hit L. So it'll fill it, you know, right in. Those are a little bit of a smaller area than we were working with before. You know, and this is me, you know, thinking on the fly as well. Before, I wasn't necessarily intending to do it this way, but I've decided I am. So, you know, it's okay to change your mind, guys. And, you know, if you have to knock stuff down or change your mind, it's perfectly acceptable. It's part of the creative process. Like I said, you're not going to have everything situated right off the bat. And you'll see me make mistakes over and over again. And I'm very sorry about the herky-jerky of my mouse work, but that's basically me not using mouse and keyboard in this game, except for when I'm building in the prefab editor. I usually play with a controller, so sorry about that. Alright, so now I think what I want to use is some pillars, just to add a little something extra on the front. You know, it's little things that you choose to do that sometimes add that extra character that you need to a POI, so they don't all look cookie cutter and look the same. Right, so I typically will gravitate towards using pillars, and I like to use steel pillars just because they're kind of glossy looking and pretty. I mean, really, there's no other reason for it. It's not like I need extra stability right here. You know, I may use them throughout the building, though, to ensure that my build is stable, especially once we get going with the second level. But for right now, it's just, you know, aesthetics at this point. And see, I have to blow this pillar out that I have because I didn't realize, you know, that I was going to be using anything else. So, once again, guys, it's okay to make mistakes. Or to, you know, do something that you have to undo later. Alright, so I'm looking for something a little bit different to do up at the top. Normally I would just fill that in with concrete and then paint it, but I don't know, I feel like I want a little something different. So you can use, you know, you can basically go through any of the blocks, you know, always test them out. Like, grab a couple at one time if you're not sure what look you're going for, and then you can, you know, you can always undo it if you need to. So you can place stuff and say, hey, that looks like crap, I really hate it. A good way to do this is hold down R, and that will get you to the advanced rotation menu, so that with, you know, any of these blocks, you should be able to rotate them, you know, different ways, see which works for you. I'm going with this upside down because I want to do that, and then I'm going to take another layer underneath and flip them back around so that the pointy ends meet. I know that's not a very professional terminology, but you get my point. You'll see what I mean. You know, so now we have like kind of a little something different that you wouldn't necessarily see. And I understand like this is, you know, a working stiff factory, so it doesn't need to be pretty, but like I said before, in the front of this building, you know, it's gonna be office areas, you know, the cafeteria. So the actual factory part of it is towards the back of the POI. So, hey, you know, you gotta have a good presentation, right? If people are coming to the working stuff factory, maybe it's, you know, big important people that are coming for a meeting, and you gotta have a good, good curbside appeal. That's what I look at it. And one thing to think about is when you're picking doors for your POI, I mean, really, you can pick any of them, but obviously you want to kind of think of what you're going for. You know, because this is like an industrial type building, I'm going to go with the standard blue doors, but, you know, you don't have to. You can go with regular house doors. Another thing to keep in mind that I've noticed with other POIs in the combo pack is that many people lock every single door. You're better off just leaving them unlocked, especially if you're going to use an extraordinarily large amount of doors. Okay? Because really, you want to think about how people are going to feel when they're going through this POI, right? If they're encountering locked doors every time they find one, you know, that gets frustrating, and people, honestly, they may decide just not to even finish going through your POI because of it. If you're a 7 Days to Die player, you know how easily we get frustrated with this game. So, try to think about that. Now we're going to attempt to figure out how big we want our courtyard to be, because I'd like to have that mapped out before I work on anything else. And really, guys, there's no rhyme or reason to what my brain tells me to do at any given moment when I'm building a POI. So, you might think like, hey, why didn't you finish the front? Like, why didn't you paint or do anything like that? It's basically because my brain said, hey, you should work on the courtyard now. So let's do that. So don't feel like you have to do anything in a certain order. I mean, obviously it's good to have your walls, but besides that, you can just do whatever you want, really. There's no correct way to do this. And all of these buttons that I'm using, you know, it's not like I magically made them up in my head. If you go into the options of the game and you go into controls, I believe it's in global is where, you know, it'll actually tell you what some of the key bindings do. So if you ever forget, you know, as you're working, you're like, oh, you know, how the heck do I fill something in, you know, without doing it block by block, or how do I remove something or delete something? You can always go back into your options, into controls, you know, monkey around in there, check every tab, and it'll give you the information that you need. So as long as you haven't changed any of your, you know, key bindings to other things when you're playing the game, that should work out pretty well for you. Oh, well, I fucked that up. Yeah, so I fucked up my stairs right there because what I forgot to do was backspace out when I did the first line of stairs. So then when I did it, it essentially was a bigger box than I anticipated. So now I added in. You just shoot it away. Just remember with the digger tool, it can shoot things out that you don't want it to. So always be careful. Try to go block by block when you're shooting things out. In the long run, it'll make your life a lot easier. So I want to extend out this courtyard a little bit more because I feel like it's entirely too small at this point. Because ideally I want to have some picnic tables, you know, maybe some kind of like fancy fountain. I think it would be awesome if we had like, I don't know, koi fish or something. Koi fish in this game. They have it in Grounded. You would think it wouldn't be that hard to put in, but anyway. It would be nice to have fish. Because then you could have like a fish pond. I think that would be super cool. They could add that to like the Dishang Tower. Because that actually has some kind of... Well, it has the pool upstairs, but I think it also has a fountain. A lot of things won't necessarily make sense until you see the final product. You know, so don't get discouraged when you're like, oh, this doesn't look the way I want it to. You know, everything comes with time. And once you get other things mapped out in your POI, you know, then you'll get that final understanding of maybe why you wanted to do it this way in the first place. So don't think that any decisions that you're making, like, aren't right or don't make any sense in the long run, because it's your POI and you can set it up however you want. And you will make changes. Alright, so that's pretty good. That's a pretty decent sized courtyard. So we can have some areas for people to sit outside off of the cafeteria that we're going to have. And then, you know, there's some front stairs for people to hop down in there after they check in. Because essentially what I'm going to be working on next is like the entranceway. So basically, you know, it'll have like a desk area, a reception area where, you know, you can come up and say, hey, I'm here to see blah, 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 the CEO of Working Stiff. I don't know who the CEO is. I think it should be me, really. I feel like that should be my job. I'll be the CEO. And I'll have like a big fancy office somewhere. I'm going to do a quick save just so that I don't lose any of my progress. That's a handy thing to do. I mean, granted, you see down in the right hand corner that saving active is checkmarked, but I never trust that, so I always just do a quick save on my own just to make sure everything is saving as it should. Because that's a real bummer when you've, you know, worked on a lot of stuff and you're super proud of yourself and then you go back into it and you're like, crap, it never saved. Especially if you get like kicked out of the game for some reason, right? It's always good to just, you know, do a quick save after you've done, you know, some extensive work on it. You know, if you're only doing like a couple of little things like throwing trash around, it's not a big deal if it doesn't necessarily save. But if you've built half of a POI and you haven't saved and then the game crashes, you get kicked out and you go back in and it's not there, you're going to be pretty bummed out. So always make sure that you're saving your game. Alright guys, so I think for this episode, that's all I wanted to really get accomplished. Stay tuned for the next one where we're going to try to finish off this front facade. Work on maybe adding a ceiling to this place so that we can sort of get working on the second story. And just one other thing to note is that when you're building a POI, I technically like to build them so they look good and that they're perfectly stable, they have no holes in them. And that's kind of a good way to do it. And then you can go back through after the entire build is done and you can mess it up. You can, you know, bust walls out, use some of the tools that they have available. And that helps you, you know, kind of get like the full idea initially because you've built the entire POI. And now you can go through and essentially dirty it up, right? Make it look like it's actually gone through an apocalypse. So that's my final thought for this episode. I hope you guys liked it, and I hope you come back and see more. And remember, hit that subscribe button. Have a good one.